Today, what we have here is an analyzation of round 4 from my tournament at the Hampton Roads game in 40 against Kevin Connolly. Lewis Stevens had white. Our opening was a Sicilian Nasdorf, and as people already know, I'm pretty much strong in this area. I like the 6F4 variation. And of course, you know, it's other moves that can be played, but we won't get into a real in-depth detail about those other moves. But as it pertains to 6F4, it's a flexible move, and white kind of aims to conceal his piece placement, where he plans to place his pieces until he can see exactly what it is that black, what kind of setup black would be attempting to play, which in this case was E6. Now E6 was an attempt by black to transpose into this Finnegan, but Queen F3 is my favorite reaction against that, and the main reason being is because I pretty much can get my attack going rather quickly. And at this point, black got many options. In the actual game, my opponent played Queen C7, but first we'll take a look at his options. First was Knight B D7. Now if he was to play Knight B D7, then white's response is G4, H6 preventing the G5 advance, just continuing a logical attack. And you know, any Sicilian player would pretty much be familiar with these lines. And what we have is a unique situation where, again, at this point, black has two options. We'll just look at one of them to get a general theme for what's going on. Here's a pin by the bishop against the queen, but if you see in the following combination, white actually gains the queen back. And you can take this variation and give it some further analysis and see that, you know, while it was rather simplistic in the form that I gave, there is plenty of options. So now let's take a look at another option that white had at this point, which was Queen B6, hitting the knight on D4. White's response to that is simple, A3, and of course black doesn't have to take the queen, but if he does, then the queen is trapped, and I just wanted to point that out. So again, in the actual game was Queen C7, and you know, normal moves, G4, which is just always the plan for me in this situation. Here black had the option of playing an early knight C6. He chose B5 instead, but against knight C6 I wouldn't have captured as I did in the regular game. I just still would have went with knight B3, G5, knight D7, bishop E3, pretty much similar to what took place in a normal game. My control over B6 was thoroughly analyzed, and of course, you know, with the advent of computer technology, you can always come up with better moves, but when you add in the human factor of being over the board, it's a whole different thing. Okay, so B5 in the normal game, G5 offering my opponent to go for his b4, but he decided to drop the knight back, which is in accordance with theory, and a3 slowing him down. And as you can see though, now in this case I captured it, but that was just a matter of taste. And as you can see, we still kind of ending up in the same scenario, the only difference being my knight not on a5. When my opponent captured queenside, I feel that in his mind he was avoiding the pawn storm coming on the king side. But what I would ask the listeners to learn from this situation is that now my pawn storm on the king side serves as a defensive fort for the fact that I haven't castled. The center hasn't been clarified, so we can consider it somewhat a closed nature position. And castling at the moment is not necessarily fast, but my opponent felt pressure coming on him by the pawn sitting up there looking gruesome to him, so he fled to the king side. And now of course I just transfer my attack. I got the queen and bishop aiming down the g1 h7 diagonal, got a knight and a rook over there, and so it'll just be a matter of opening up some lines and getting over there. Okay, so I forced them to back up so that my queen bishop battery could breathe, and now it's time to open some lines. Queen b7, so that he could free the knight up, because bishop b6 pinning the queen and the rook was a major threat to him. But I had other operations, and now that the a file is open, my rook was able to penetrate, so perhaps capturing back with the bishop would have been somewhat better, but I think my opponent was afraid of possibly e5 maybe. We have to look at that another time. Okay, and the point of castling now obviously is to be able to get the f rook to a1. And as you can see, my opponent is clearly at a loss. Unprotected bishop on c6, unprotected bishop on e7. Rooks have no open diagonals. Offside queen inadequately protected, of course. And so my opponent played f6, which is why I played h4 earlier. The computer didn't agree with my h4, but the main reason for my h4 is to be able to capture back on g5 without having to open up the f file. This helped keep my king safe. So I continue with my own plans, and as you can see, like I said, capturing back, keeping the file closed, because his rook d f8 now doesn't really pose a threat to me. So bishop f1 carrying out my plans, which was another reason of moving the rook on f1, so that the bishop could drop back and pressure the g5 pawn. Now of course, if bishop takes on d5, then rook a8 pinning the queen. Alright, so my opponent dropped back to b7. Okay, bishop takes, because I foresaw that this would lead to capturing his queen. And queen e2 is to prevent checking on g4, but it also sets up a threat of queen b5 check, capturing the rook, which my opponent missed. And from here is just a matter of technique. I was willing to actually sacrifice the queen for one of the rooks, and you know, the pawns the passed pawns on the queen side was going to really be a serious problem, forcing him just to give up the rook for one of the pieces, and then I could have just simply finished him off. And at this point, I think my opponent just didn't really want to resign, but he had to. Thank you very much. Another Team Stevens event.